I think almost everybody on the trading floor loved the bear side because the downward movements tend to happen more quickly. And so if you shorted something and it dropped, your return happened very quickly. If you were a bull, particularly if you go back to the late 70s and in the 80s, the bull markets took months, if not a year to develop, right? So you had to be in and write it out and watch it up and down and sit there. And if you understand that the vast majority of the people on the trading floor have attention deficit disorder, probably the largest concentration of people with attention deficit disorder, sitting, doing nothing, watching your trade make you money is almost impossible. The guys that were really smart on the floor, when things got slow, they went to breakfast, they went and had coffee, they went upstairs and watched movies, because they learned very quickly if the market wasn't moving, if the things weren't happening, and I stand here, I'm going to lose money. So they very clearly learned, you can say they're diagnosed, they're not diagnosed, but it was about the money, and they know if I stand here, I can't have it. So things slow down, nothing happens, the pit's emptied out because of that. My anxiety was quelled between the moment when all my out trades are settled and the opening bell rang. And that 15 or 20 minutes every day was my peaceful time. Because if the market's moving and the bell rings, the adrenaline rush comes in, the excitement goes on, the world goes crazy, and you're in it. I mean, you're in the game, and you just love the game and want to participate in it. When the market is really quiet and there's not much going on and there's no expectations, then the bell rings and everybody goes, yeah, okay, the bell rung. I mean, there were guys, in order to get themselves geared up, would literally start banging into people, knocking people around just so they could get their energy up there going, and irritated the crap out of people, but there was nothing they could do about it. I think everybody has been stuck on the close on a trade that you didn't want, and you carry it, right? I mean, one of the big FBI sting pieces was they would go, I got hung on a one lot. Can you help me out? And the guy would go, yeah, I'll help you. I got a position. You can handle that. I think that being stuck on the close with a position you didn't want really was the purview of the people that wanted to trade flat every day and not go home with a position. I tended to trade with positions. So I may not have the position size that I wanted one way or another, but it's part of the game, right? There were guys that had relationships and there wasn't much you could do about it. And you hear the stories of so-and-so bought this broker a Corvette out of the goodness of his heart. The guy's got a big heart. So there were brokers that had favored people standing in front of them that not only took them off of any errors they had, but also had most favored status on trades. Most of the time it was somebody they knew as a relative, or it was a high school friend or something like that they pulled into the business, and those things occurred. But to me, that was one of the great frustrations, and one of the things that made me so angry was life isn't fair. The floor wasn't fair. You might have been first on the trade, and he didn't hear you. Shocking. It's life, you got to figure out how to survive in the middle of reality. I did my best to be absolutely as fair as possible. I tried to spread the trades around because, in my view of the world, it doesn't serve a broker to feed one person all the time. The question I ask to this day, what happens if he gets hit by a bus? If I have an employee and they're hit by a bus and I don't have a backup, what do I have? If you're in the pit and you have one guy that you lean on all the time and they're hit by a bus, what are you going to do? I refused to trade when I was filling orders. I mean, there was a point in time when in the Eurodollars, the biggest broker was the biggest local. What does that tell you? Look at the breadcrumbs. Can't prove anything, but the breadcrumbs are there. One of the things that were very clear on the trading floor was if you were not personally motivated to get ahead, you weren't getting ahead. There was nobody that pulled you along. If you wanted to come in as a clerk and stay a clerk for 40 years, there were people that did that. Now, were there people that came in with family connections that went bing, bing and were there? Well, of course there were. You always had that. The development of the broker groups was interesting, and it goes back well before I was there because there were individual brokers that were substantially politically connected and in control. And the broker groups or those individuals were the ones that killed the gold because they wouldn't allow other brokers to come in to fill the orders, so they couldn't handle the capacity. The quality of the fills was so poor that they ultimately decided that Chicago was worse than New York, which for people within the industry is quite a black eye. As time went on, the broker groups gained more and more power. And initially, it was a way for someone to come in to become a clerk, to fill orders for a while, to get a membership and go out and be on his own. And as time went on, they gave less and less to the individual that came in, less and less opportunity, until basically people that went to work for them became indentured servants. And then ultimately, it was the guys on the desks that became the broker groups that had the people in the pit and controlled everything and paid out less. Maury Levy and his brothers were big currency traders, and you would pay attention to what they were doing. And Saul Stone had a big currency operation that you would pay attention to. Most of the large currency traders didn't stand in the pit. It wasn't like one might think of a Baldwin in the bonds, where that you had someone that was standing in the pit all day watching the flow back and forth. In the currency markets in particular, you had no one like that. I mean, Bill Shepard was an enormous currency trader, and you never saw him on the floor. The investment bankers were rather convinced that the CME would need an outside president to head the process of becoming a public entity. And I was not involved in the recruiting or the interview or anything else. Jack and Leo were very deeply involved in it, a couple of other people. And Jim McNulty was presented to the board as one of us. He was a Chicago guy. He had worked for the bank. He had been a trader. He was our kind of guy that was going to lead us forward. And both Leo and Jack backed him 100%. I was told that he did a very good job in the dog and pony show in going out and speaking to the customers. Clearly, the relationship between McNulty and the board soured. And there were certain members of the board that wanted to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. But very clearly, Leo and Jack slammed the door. Were not in favor of him, and Scott Gordon, who had been chairman, was rather sitting on the fence with McNulty, kind of give him a chance, work with him. We hired him, we backed him, so on and so forth. And Jack and Leo were absolutely, completely against that. And so Terry Duffy, who is the chairman to today, as I have been told, went to Leo and told Leo that he wanted to run for the chairmanship, and Leo gave him the blessing, and people rallied behind him, and it happened. And I think that I was gone from the board, at that next election. And I think that the tone and the tenor changed pretty dramatically when Scott Gordon left and Terry took over, not because of Terry as much as for Leo and Jack and the other people on the board were done with the direction that he wanted to go. I mean, one of the things that happened was when McNulty was hired, the board was trying to be very open and very generous, and he wanted to hire 10 guys to be his top-level lieutenants. And the mistake, in my view, was that he seemed to think that he was elected because we were broken. And he and his boys had to come in and fix us. The exchange was far from broken. The exchange was running extremely well and had always run extremely well. The staff of the exchange was incredibly dedicated, committed, knowledgeable, efficient, effective, carried out everything that was wanted. But he brought his team in, put in his head of business, head of marketing, his IT head, his head of HR, so on and so forth, and wiped out all the people that were there. And very clearly, they were loyal to Jim and carried Jim's water. So historically, I think that the board had expected loyalty to the board. Well, now you had loyalty to Jim. That didn't rub people the right way because there was a movement at that point to eliminate all members. Jim talked any number of times that all members should be off the board of directors. Having started working for Ralph here at the Board of Trade, I knew the Board of Trade and I went over to the CME, and certainly not great partisan, but I think that my observation when I was with Ralph and when I started at the CME as the head of the audit staff, the Board of Trade was the lead exchange in the world. And their perspective on the world is, we are the Board of Trade. The world comes to us. We don't go to the world. The CFTC, they can come to us. They can come to us. We're the Board of Trade. We've been here forever. We're the best. We're the top. The CME on the other side was always Avis in the Hertz-Avis competition. We're second and we try a little harder. They were always thinking about what they could do to get better, thinking about how do we meet the competition, what's the next thing we need to do. And Leo was a great salesman, very innovative. If he didn't have the idea, he picked the idea from someone else. And Leo and Jack, I think, did a great job of leading the exchange. And certainly Leo's influence lasted for years and years and years. And that was probably a good thing. But to me, that was the enormous difference among them. In thinking about the Board of Trade Clearing Corporation, my understanding is in 1947, the New York banks convinced the Board of Trade to separate the clearing company. And they were given a seat on the clearing corporation and basically controlled the clearing corporation. While I was on the board, we had a member from one of the New York banks who was on our board of directors who in the middle of the meeting stood up and said, "We're going to bury you. The New York banks are going to put together an exchange and we're going to wipe out the CME." I thought it was quite audacious for you to stand up in the middle of a CME board meeting when you've been elected to the board of the CME and say that you're going to destroy the exchange. But what did they do to the clearing corporation? The sole source of revenue for the clearing corporation was the Board of Trade revenues. They voted to allow US Eurex to clear through the clearing corporation. What do you expect the Board of Trade to do? They destroyed the clearing corporation. They don't care. There was no concern whatsoever about this enterprise that had existed for so long, that served the Board of Trade so well, And I think that was a significant event. I was on the board of directors throughout the mid to late 90s and left the board in around 2000. And while I was on the board of directors, I was committing 40 to 60 hours a week on the board. I was the chairman of 15 committees, I was on 40, and I really had lost touch with the trading floor. And I went back down to the trading floor and stood there and had really reached a point where that I just was out of touch with the flow of the market and what was going on, and struggle as I might, I couldn't get it. I went back upstairs to decide that I was going to try and trade electronically. And what I will tell you is electronic trading is a video game. Floor trading is rugby. And there aren't many that can do both. And I scaled back and tried and just didn't have success. And so at that point in time, my youngest son, who was the chief technology officer for GNI had just been acquired by EDF Man Financial, and he looked at them and he looked at the kind of conditions and work that they were doing, and he said, I don't want to do that. So he and I came together with an idea for a software co-hosting company to provide execution software to the community as it was going electronic. Now the reality is all the clearing firms had their own front-end system, but their view of the electronic system was much as their view of the employees of the trading floor, and that is less is better. The less I pay to the people on the trading floor, the more money I make, so I'm going to hire gang members from the south side. They may make a little money on the side, I'm not involved in that, but they're not going to cost me much. And that was the typical view of the clearing firm at that point in time. Our view of the world was we can provide a high quality system that will provide reliable connectivity and high service, and it's a no-brainer. So we jumped in and we're off and running. Ask for advice from more people. Not how to trade, but to form a larger network of people that I would sit down and talk to and gather their opinion about the major decisions in life. And rather, they're not going to share their trading secrets. I mean, Ralph told me early on, he said, those that know don't tell, and those that tell don't know, so don't bother. And I think he's right. I think that those that know don't tell. But they will share life's perspectives. They will share what their view of the future is. Even if they tell you I'm long soybeans, as Ralph said, I could change my mind in 5 minutes and you would never know. So telling you what my position is and what my opinion is of little value to you. You have to develop your own. In 2002, my son Derek and I decided to form a company which would host and manage software that other people had written, such as PAT software, trading technology software, hosted on our servers, connected to the exchanges, and provide 24-hour-a-day support. This was our business model for a number of years and until about 2010, for about 8 years. And in 2010, we started branching out in providing software that would support the execution, order management kinds of software, using fixed connectivity where that you could pass an order book back and forth and so on. And one of the things that has happened in the industry, which should be no surprise to any of us, although it always comes as a surprise, each one of these firms, like Trading Technologies, has decided that they want all of the software to be run on their own servers and everybody has to go through them. It happens in all industries. It's consolidation. You want a bigger piece of the pie. You want more of it. And so the net result is we have and are transitioning to a software company providing regulation technology. With the advent of Dodd-Frank and MiFID II in Europe, the regulatory requirements have just exploded. Historically, you could take something from the end of the day and you could analyze it, or you could wait 2 or 3 days to collect a commission or collect the money that was owed to you. Well, now they want real-time analysis related to risk management, related to compliance, related to data. Exchange will come back to you 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later and go, I've got a question about these trades by this person from that point in time. I want you to pull out all the trade data related to that. We now have software that will warehouse that data and allow you to access that so that we can take data from all the different front ends, compare it to what the exchange gave you, compare it to the clearing, and normalize the data and allow it for you. I mean, the people that are our customers, and our customers are primarily the money center banks, the FCMs, some of the prop trading groups, and what we've seen in relation to that is, if you go back far enough, the CFTC did the enforcement. Well, then they kind of passed it to the exchange and said, well, you got to do some of this enforcement. Well, now the exchange has kind of passed it to the clearing members and said, well, you got to do some of this enforcement. Well, now they've pushed it down to the individual prop trading groups and individual firms that go, you've got to do the enforcement. So now what you see, instead of having one entity looking at you, you've got at least 5. So the demand for all of this software just got multiplied. On one hand, it's painful to have to make the changes. On the other hand, I'm absolutely delighted that we're in the software business, and I never expected to be a compliance regulation technology guy, but that's where we're going.